Did a UFO shoot down Captain Mantell? By me, Adrian, Erin, and Prabhneet. Who is Captain Mantell? His name was Captain Thomas F. Mantell. He was 25 years old at the time of his death. He was a member of the Kentucky Air National Guard, and he was the first human being to lose his life following an unidentified flying object. He piloted an F-51 Mustang fighter jet, and I saw on other websites that it was also known as the P-51, or there was a similar plane known as the P-51.
The story of what happened. So on January 7, 1948, Kentucky Air National Guard fighter pilot Captain Thomas F. Mantell crashed his F-51 aircraft near Franklin, Kentucky. He had been chasing a large object which was claimed to be a flying saucer or an unidentified flying object. There were multiple witnesses to this object and to the incident, both in the air and on the ground, including the commanding officer at Godman Army Airfield, Colonel Guy F. Hicks. This incident began at 1:20 p.m. when the military police had been notified by authorities about calls of an unidentified object flying over Maysville, Kentucky. However, no one was able to properly identify the object. For a period of an hour and 25 minutes, dozens of witnesses, including Colonel Hicks, watched as the unidentified object remained motionless in the sky. Some witnesses claimed that it moved quietly and slowly, while others claimed it hovered for a short period of time and then resumed its slow flight. At 2:45 p.m., a group of F-51 Mustang fighters flew over the Godman Army field while the object was still visible in the sky. The flight leader, Captain Mantell, was asked if he would investigate the foreign object to determine what it is, and he agreed to attempt an intercept. He then began spiraling and climbed 15,000 feet, at which he then radioed over to the tower that the object was above him and it was traveling at half the speed that he was, and he reported that it was metal and tremendous in size. There is conflicting information on the altitudes that were reached by the pilots, but Mantell and two of his wingmen did reach 15,000 feet. There is some documentation that suggests that all three of them went up to 22,000 feet, at which point then both wingman Lieutenant Clemens and Lieutenant Hammond had turned back. The military has regulations that state that oxygen equipment is required to be used at altitudes higher than 14,000 feet, which is why Lieutenant Hammond returned after 22,000 feet as his oxygen equipment was failing. However, Captain Mantell continued to climb at higher altitudes even though he had no oxygen equipment on his aircraft. At 3:10 p.m., Captain Mantell was the only pilot left chasing the object at 23,000 feet. The last that anyone had seen of him, he was still ascending towards the unidentified object, but he had made no radio contact to his wingman or back to the tower at Godman Airfield. By 3:15 p.m., everyone had lost both visual and radio contact with him. A search was launched after many witnesses feared what may have happened to Captain Mantell. At around 5 p.m. on a farm near Franklin, Kentucky, the remains of his F-51 were found scattered around the area, and Mantell's body was found strapped inside the cockpit of the aircraft. On his body, his watch was found stopped at 3:18 p.m., and from this evidence, it's perceived that he was killed in the crash of his aircraft. One of the possible explanations given was that it was the planet Venus that was occupying the sky, which Venus could have been seen in the daylight at the time of the initial sighting in the approximate location of where the unidentified object was that day. However, there is another possible explanation which was provided that the object was the Skyhook cosmic ray research balloon that Captain Mantell may have been pursuing.
Story continued, including transcript. At approximately 1:30 p.m., reports were received of a large circular object spotted flying over the Mansville, Irvington, and Owensboro area. It was clearly seen from the Godman Air Force Base and was described as being an extremely large, round, whitish in color with a red light towards its bottom side and seemed to be moving slowly toward the south. About an hour after the initial reports, Mantell's group was asked to investigate. He was accompanied by 3 other guard planes. The actual transcripts read, Godman Tower calling the flight of 4 ships northbound over Godman Field. Do you read? Over. 2 times before receiving a response. Roger. Godman Tower, this is National Guard 869, flight leader of the formation. Over. National Guard 869 from Godman Tower. We have an object out south of Godman here that we are unable to identify, and we would like to know if you have enough gas, and if so, could you take a look for us, if you will. Roger. I have the gas, and I will take a look for you if you give me the correct heading. One of his 3 companions in flight received permission to continue his pre-assigned flight plan, while Mantell and the remaining 2 planes headed to the coordinates of the visual sightings. Mantell led the way in the climb to 15,000 feet, and upon reaching the position, he radioed the following statement back to the control tower. The object is directly ahead of and above me now, moving at about half my speed. It appears to be a metallic object or possibly a reflection of the sun from a metallic object, and it is of tremendous size. I'm still climbing. I'm trying to close in for a better look. 18,000, 20,000, 22,000 feet, too high for the World War II fighters without oxygen. The other 2 planes turned back, leaving Mantell alone to pursue the giant object. By all accounts, Mantell must have passed out from lack of oxygen at about 30,000 feet. At least his plane leveled off at that height. His plane now began to plunge back toward Earth. He crashed a few harrowing moments later on the farm of William J. Phillips, near Franklin, Kentucky. Mantell's watch stopped at 3:16 p.m., and his body was still strapped in his plane, which became his coffin. His final moments. Richard T. Miller was forced to give all personnel related to the crash over, and that the investigation was already completed, despite only just happening. He was skeptical of why the government is trying so hard to cover this up. In recent years, Captain James F. Dusler stated that he and several other officers actually saw the gigantic UFO hovering over the Godman Field that day. He said that the UFO was a strange, gray-looking object which looked like a rotating inverted ice cream cone. Observations were made on the crash site that indicated the crash was unlike any other crash of this caliber, and that all indications were that it had just belly flopped into the clearing. I must admit I found this very strange. Shortly after the crash, Dusler visited the site and made these observations. The wings and tail section had broken off on impact with the ground and were a short distance from the plane, he recalled. There was no damage to the surrounding trees, and it was obvious that there had been no forward or sideways motion when the plane had come down. It just appeared to have belly flopped into the clearing. There was very little damage to the fuselage, which was in one piece, and no signs of blood whatsoever in the cockpit. There was no scratching on the body of the fuselage to indicate any forward movement, and the propeller blade bore no telltale scratch marks to show it had been rotating at the time of impact. And one blade had been embedded into the ground. The damage pattern was not consistent with an aircraft of this type crashing at high speed into the ground. Because of the large engine in the nose of the plane, it would have come down nose first and hit the ground at an angle. Even if it had managed to glide in, it would have cut a swath through the trees and a channel into the ground. None of these signs were present.
The Venus Explanation and Rejection. The crash was investigated by a group called Project Sign. They were the first Air Force research group that were tasked to handle UFO reports. And witnesses say that they actually worked very fast on the Mantell incident. They also hired in 1948 Dr. J. Allen Hynek, an astronomer from Ohio State University. And he'd come to the conclusion that Mantell had actually tried to fly to the planet Venus because he had mistaken it for a UFO, and he's passed out because he was too high in the atmosphere and ultimately crashed into the ground and reached his fate. However, in 1952, this explanation was actually rejected by the same Dr. J. Allen Hynek because he actually stated that Venus wasn't bright enough to be seen by Mantell and witnesses on the ground. And even if it was visible, it would have been a pinpoint of light, as well as many eyewitness reports stated and gave descriptions that indicated there was a large object in the sky at the time that wasn't a planet. It was more so a saucer in the sky.
In the late 1940s, Skyhook balloons were used for long-duration observations capable of collecting highly specialized information and photographs. They could rise to altitudes in excess of 100,000 feet. At low altitudes, a small bubble is formed at the top of the balloon, resembling an upside-down teardrop. As the balloon raises and expands, it can reach diameters of more than 30 meters. Blue Book Chief Edward Ruppelt reopened the case in 1952, and he learned the Navy had been secretly launching these high-altitude Skyhook balloons. These balloons had the capability of moving along jet streams at the speed indicated by Mantell. On the same day as Mantell's sightings, there were many reports of an object that fit the description of a Skyhook balloon. After checking the weather and wind patterns, Ruppelt concluded Mantell's sightings could have indeed been a Skyhook balloon, and the explanation was announced to the public. However, Ruppelt was never able to establish whether a balloon was launched that day. Since then, Clifford Stone, a 20-year U.S. Army veteran, has come forward with information indicating, as per the Office of Naval Research, there was definitely no Skyhook balloons launched from January 6 to January 8 in 1948. Although the Skyhook explanation has good merit, the matter cannot be settled until official records are publicized.
Moving on to the outcome. The Venus explanation was rejected as astronomers who were consulting on the case stated that they had doubts that a random search of the sky would have resulted in finding the planet Venus. Although it is bright enough to be seen in the daylight, the planet likely would have blended into the surrounding sky easily. Even with the slightest of haze, Venus would not have been visible to the witnesses who were on the ground. In regard to the Skyhook balloon explanation, it has the possibility of being rejected as there was no conclusive evidence given that a balloon was flown over the Godman Army airfields on January 7, 1948, or that any balloon had been launched on that day. Whatever did happen on January 7, 1948, when Captain Thomas F. Mantell crashed his aircraft, it has been found that it is likely not the planet Venus that he had been pursuing, nor could it have been the Navy Skyhook cosmic ray research balloon. Could it have been a visitor from another planet?
And here are all our references that we used. Thank you for watching our presentation. Have a good day.